For decades, the ATF has been at the center of controversy, accused of trampling on the Second Amendment and overstepping its bounds. Its actions have turned millions of law-abiding gun owners into criminals with the stroke of a pen. They've written all sorts of questionable regulations. They also have a long history of high-profile failures. It's no wonder calls for its abolition are growing louder. In this video, we'll talk about the bold plan to dismantle the ATF, the stakes for constitutional rights, and whether Trump's return to office could finally give Congress the push it needs to make this a reality. This isn't just a fight against federal overreach. Far from it. We don't want to sound overly optimistic, but it's looking like we might be able to reclaim state sovereignty and protect our freedoms as guaranteed by the Constitution. Brace yourself as we unravel the history and controversies surrounding this tyrannical agency and the steps our new conservative government is taking in what could be our most pivotal Second Amendment fight yet. The ATF was established to enforce federal laws related to alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives, aiming to combat illegal trafficking and ensure public safety. But to young'uns who aren't aware, this agency's history is marred by egregious overreach and catastrophic failures that have eroded public trust and trampled on our constitutional rights under the Second Amendment. One of the most notorious incidents is the 1992 Ruby Ridge standoff. The ATF, in its relentless pursuit of Randy Weaver over dubious firearms charges, set off a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. Weaver, a reclusive individual with anti-government sentiments, was accused of selling 2 sawed-off shotguns to an undercover ATF informant. However, the circumstances surrounding this transaction raised serious questions about entrapment and the ATF's methods. When Weaver failed to appear in court, partly due to a miscommunication about his court date, the U.S. Marshals Service was tasked with his arrest. On August 21, 1992, during a surveillance operation near Weaver's remote Idaho cabin, federal agents encountered Weaver's 14-year-old son, Sammy, and family friend Kevin Harris. The situation escalated rapidly. Agents shot the family dog, Stryker, prompting a firefight that resulted in Sammy being shot in the back and killed as he tried to flee. Deputy U.S. Marshal William Deegan also died in the exchange. The following day, an FBI sniper, operating under controversial rules of engagement, fired into the Weaver cabin, fatally wounding Weaver's wife, Vicki, as she held their 10-month-old daughter. This reckless use of force, resulting in the deaths of a child and a mother, showcased a blatant disregard for human life and due process. The Ruby Ridge standoff lasted 11 days, drawing national attention and widespread condemnation. The government's heavy-handed tactics not only led to unnecessary loss of life, but also fueled deep-seated distrust among gun owners and advocates of the Second Amendment. The incident became a rallying point for those who viewed federal agencies as oppressive and unaccountable. In the aftermath, Randy Weaver was acquitted of the most serious charges, and the surviving members of his family received a $3.1 million settlement from the government. This payout was a tacit acknowledgment of the egregious misconduct by federal agents. The following year, the ATF orchestrated a raid on the Branch Davidian compound near Waco, Texas, that would become one of the agency's most infamous failures. The operation was billed as an attempt to serve a search warrant for suspected weapons violations, claiming the group was stockpiling illegal firearms. But what followed was a chain of catastrophic decisions that escalated tensions and led to national outrage. The raid began on February 28th, with ATF agents storming the heavily fortified compound. The Davidians, led by David Koresh, were prepared, and a fierce gun battle broke out, leaving 4 federal agents and 6 Davidians dead. What was supposed to be a quick operation turned into a prolonged 51-day standoff, as law enforcement encircled the compound while negotiations played out. The standoff ended on April 19th in a tragic and fiery climax. Federal agents launched an aggressive assault, deploying tear gas to force the group out. Instead of surrendering, a fire erupted inside the compound. Whether the fire was started by the Davidians or triggered by federal actions remains a point of heated debate. What is undisputed, however, is the toll: 76 lives lost, including women and children, in an inferno that could have been avoided. The Waco Siege proved not only the ATF's incompetence in managing high-stakes operations, but also its willingness to escalate situations to deadly extremes. The agency's tactics, using tanks, excessive force, and questionable rules of engagement, sparked a backlash, with many accusing the government of overreach and brutality. Waco became a symbol of federal overreach and a rallying cry against unchecked government power. But the ATF's abuse of power didn't stop there. Between 2006 and 2011, the agency initiated Operation Fast and Furious, allowing firearms to be sold to suspected straw purchasers with the intent to trace them to Mexican drug cartels. This ill-conceived strategy resulted in over 2,000 firearms disappearing into criminal hands, contributing to numerous crimes and the death of U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. The ATF's pattern of overreach and disregard for due process make the agency a direct threat to our Second Amendment rights. In recent years, the ATF has continued its assault on gun rights through arbitrary regulations. In 2023, the agency reclassified firearms equipped with stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles, subjecting them to stringent regulations under the National Firearms Act. This capricious decision instantly turned millions of lawful gun owners into potential felons, exemplifying the ATF's penchant for punitive measures without legislative backing. Similarly, the ATF has expanded the definition of firearm to include so-called 80% receivers, unfinished gun parts that require significant machining to become functional. By unilaterally redefining these components as firearms, the agency has imposed onerous restrictions on hobbyists and law-abiding citizens engaging in legal activities. Congress has condemned the ATF's constitutionally and legally reprehensible tactics, yet the agency remains unaccountable, persisting in its mission to undermine the Second Amendment. The ATF's legacy is one of systemic abuse, failed operations, and relentless encroachment on individual freedoms. Its actions have not only failed to meet its original mandate, but have also actively subverted the rights it was supposed to protect. In light of this sordid history, a bold initiative has emerged to dismantle the ATF and restore constitutional governance. This effort seeks to end the agency's reign of terror and return authority to the states, where it rightfully belongs. Congressman Eric Burleson, a sixth-generation Missourian, has emerged as a formidable advocate for Second Amendment rights, challenging federal overreach with unwavering determination. With 2 decades of experience as an investment advisor and software consultant, Burleson transitioned into politics, serving in the Missouri House of Representatives and later in the state Senate. His legislative tenure is marked by a steadfast commitment to individual liberties and a pronounced skepticism of expansive federal authority. In 2016, as a state legislator, Burleson was the lead sponsor of Missouri's constitutional carry legislation, which allows law-abiding citizens to carry concealed firearms without a permit. This significant policy shift empowered Missourians to exercise their right to self-defense more freely. Burleson's dedication to gun rights continued with his sponsorship of the Second Amendment Preservation Act, or SAPI-A, in 2021, which asserts Missouri's authority to protect its citizens from federal overreach by prohibiting state enforcement of federal gun regulations deemed unconstitutional. Then in January 2023, Burleson introduced his inaugural bill in Congress, the Repeal the NFA Act, aiming to dismantle the National Firearms Act of 1934. The guy gets it. The NFA is antiquated legislation that imposes onerous taxes and registration requirements on specific firearms and accessories, infringing upon constitutional rights. Burleson's bill seeks to eliminate these constraints, restoring freedoms that have been unjustly curtailed for nearly a century. Burleson's legislative initiative is not an isolated endeavor. He co-sponsored Representative Matt Gaetz's bill to abolish the ATF. By aligning with Gaetz, Burleson underscores his dedication to confronting federal entities that undermine individual liberties. The rationale behind Burleson's legislative efforts is clear. Federal overreach infringes upon Second Amendment rights, and states are better positioned to regulate firearms without intrusive federal interference. He asserts that the federal government has exploited the NFA to encroach upon citizens' rights, with the ATF's recent pistol brace rule exemplifying such blatant attacks. In addition, Burleson believes that the ATF should be abolished for a lot of reasons. For one, the ATF has repeatedly encroached upon the Second Amendment, which explicitly states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yet the agency has imposed numerous regulations that restrict lawful gun ownership. A glaring example is the reclassification of firearms equipped with stabilizing braces. Originally designed to aid disabled shooters, these braces were deemed permissible. However, in 2023, the ATF reversed its stance, declaring that such attachments effectively turn pistols into short-barreled rifles, thereby subjecting them to stringent regulations under the National Firearms Act. This abrupt change criminalized millions of law-abiding gun owners overnight, forcing them to either register their firearms, remove the braces, or face potential felony charges. Then there's the ATF's focus, or lack thereof, only targeting law-abiding citizens instead of addressing genuine criminal activity. The agency's efforts to regulate 80% receivers, unfinished firearm components that require significant machining before they can function, serve as a prime example. By unilaterally redefining these incomplete parts as firearms, the ATF has imposed burdensome restrictions on hobbyists and enthusiasts engaged in lawful activities. This move does little to deter criminals, who typically obtain fully functional firearms through illicit means, and instead hampers responsible gun owners. The ATF also has a history of commandeering local law enforcement to enforce federal regulations that have not been enacted by state legislatures. This practice undermines state sovereignty and forces local agencies to implement policies that may conflict with their constituents' values and laws. Such federal overreach not only strains local resources, but also erodes public trust in both federal and state institutions. Congress has lambasted the ATF for its constitutionally and legally reprehensible tactics, yet the agency continues to operate with impunity. Its persistent overreach and disregard for constitutional rights have led to growing calls for its abolition. The case against this abusive agency is compelling, but whether or not it can be abolished is another issue altogether. There will be a lot of hurdles when dismantling such an entrenched institution. Rhinos, or so-called moderate Republicans, particularly those representing purple states, often exhibit reluctance toward such measures. Their hesitation stems from concerns about alienating their left-leaning anti-gun constituents, who view the ATF's role in regulating firearms as essential to public safety. This cautious approach is evident in the 2024 elections, where Republicans secured a Senate majority, yet faced resistance in battleground states. The chaotic nature of politics further complicates efforts to dismantle the ATF. Achieving consensus among lawmakers is akin to herding cats, with divergent interests and priorities often leading to legislative gridlock. Even within the Republican Party, factions differ on the extent of government intervention in gun regulation, making unified action challenging. For all these reasons, pro-2A congressmen are considering alternative strategies to curtail the ATF's influence. One approach involves reducing or even eliminating the agency's funding, thereby incapacitating its operational capabilities. This can achieve de facto abolition, but it can also face opposition from anti-gun congressmen who argue that defunding could hinder efforts to combat violent crime and enforce existing gun laws. Repealing specific regulations. Another strategy focuses on dismantling onerous regulations enforced by the ATF. For instance, the NFA imposes stringent controls on certain firearms and accessories. Congressman Eric Burleson and other pro-2A legislators have introduced bills to repeal the NFA. Additionally, challenging specific ATF rules, such as those concerning stabilizing braces, has seen success in courts, with federal judges overturning these regulations for overstepping legal boundaries. While the ultimate goal of abolishing the ATF may seem elusive, incremental victories play an important role in advancing the cause. Each successful challenge to the agency's overreach not only restores individual liberties, but also sets legal precedents that constrain future regulatory excesses. These smaller wins accumulate, gradually eroding the ATF's authority and paving the way for more substantial reforms. And that's it for this video. What's your opinion on Burleson? What do you think of his move to abolish the ATF? Are we being overly optimistic if we think they can do it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates on this fight to protect our constitutional rights.